Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Josh here from Polymathics, the YouTube channel that helps you become a modern-day Renaissance man. In this video, we're going to discuss the real-life applications of the monomyth, and we're going to start a discussion about archetypes that will lead into further videos. This discussion is predicated, or not predicated, the discussion, the catalyst for this was a question that I received. And let me just show you real quick. I'm going to give you a screen share here, and we're going to bounce back and forth between the screen share for this video, if my computer will let me. Okay, here we go. So a couple weeks ago, I did a channel update here, and one of the questions I got from Dini Desvanya, I believe that's how you pronounce it, is this is what she said. You can read along here just in case the font is too small for you. I'll read. It basically says, oh, let me get my microphone. Make sure that all clear here. Okay. It says, I have a friend who is a hero archetype, and he said that I offer him a portal of ideas. He said he loves me. How do I know that I am the quote-unquote goddess that is created for him? And then here's her extra info. I took the archetype test and get the father archetype. He, the hero, always comes to me if he feels like he's losing energy and comfortable to be vulnerable with me. Looks like he trusts me, also tries to protect my emotion and caring. And there's a lot more here. Let's see if there's any more. She asked what my archetype is. Okay, so that's pretty much the gist of all I want to say to Dini, if that, or Dini, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but thanks for the question. It's a little bit different than many of the questions that I deal with, because this is more of a real life application of the monomyth compared to a writing approach. But what it does is it opens up two conversations that I think are important, which is one, a real life approach to, or a real life application of the monomyth, and writing applications. So I think this is good, and I do get questions like this from time to time, and I believe that it's important that I address them. So the first thing, let me just break it down, like how I'm going to handle this question. First, I'm going to go to the general answer, because I believe that answer is going to edify most of the people who watch the channel. And then from there, I'll go a little bit more specific to Dini's actual situation. So the first thing that everyone should be aware is that there are a whole bunch of archetype quizzes online. And I have no idea which one she took. She didn't leave a link or anything, but it could be any one of these, right? And I personally haven't taken any, but like, for example, this one will tell you what Jungian or what Jung archetype you are, if my internet will get us there. So like you answer a bunch of these questions, and then it'll tell you, you know, are you the wise old man? Are you the shadow? All these things. And there, like I said, I mean, you can look through here. There's a whole bunch. For those of you that don't know what an archetype is, we should probably step back real quick and just discuss that for a second. Most archetypes that people are generally familiar with are zodiac signs. A zodiac sign is a form of an archetype. It is not an archetype from the monomyth specifically, nor is it a writing archetype, but it is one. And then if I'm going to actually stop sharing here for a second. Stop sharing. I'm going to go back to the camera so I can show you some books here. So the archetypes that we mainly discuss when it comes to the hero's journey, the monomyth, are the archetypes that were originally discussed in this book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, written by Joseph Campbell. And in here, he describes the hero, the mentor, the frog, the dragon. They're basically broken up into two different types. There are stage archetypes and role archetypes. We'll get back to that. But just so everybody has an understanding, there are other types of archetypes. In this book, 45 Master Characters, Victoria Lynn Schmidt talks about what I consider to be persona archetypes. So if you've ever taken one of those quizzes where it tells you like you're an ANTH or IJ, I don't even remember the things, but it tells you what your personality is. You're a very introverted person versus extroverted and stuff. That's what these character types are. Okay, they're persona based. What is that? Well, for example, Spock, right? She has a picture of Spock here on the cover. Spock is a very logical mindseted character. So that is a personality based character. You can engraft these type of persona-based archetypes on top of a monomythic archetype to great success. And it will, I think it would definitely benefit. But the monomythic archetypes, if you ask me, because they're psychologically based, they are the foundational archetype that all people go to. Even if we go back to the Zodiac Signs, which I'll take a look at one more time, those are characteristic based on your birth date and your star sign and all this other stuff. But if you look at it, it's characteristics. The monomyth archetypes are based psychologically. And if we take a look at this book right here, this is a book that I got in college, and I don't normally reference many college books because, in my opinion, they're not as good as like books that you find in the real world. But this book in particular, it's called The Personality Puzzle. I have the 6th edition. It was written by David Funder. It's a really good introduction into psychology in general, but it has a whole chapter on psychoanalysis. So it talks about Freud, it talks about Carl Jung, and some others in that field. But the reason why those two are so important is because in A Hero with 1,000 Faces, those are the two main people, when it comes to archetypes, that Joseph Campbell relied heavily on their work to lay the foundation of like where these things come from and stuff. That's not to say that there isn't more information out there on archetypes. As we can see, there's various forms of archetypes, okay? But when we're talking about a monomythic archetype, we're thinking in the realm of psychology, not zodiac signs, not persona-based or personality traits. That's the key, both in writing and in real-life application. So for both of the answers that I'm about to give to this topic, it has to do with psychology, okay? And actually it has to do with psychological maturations. As we mature from infant, from baby to infant to child to adolescent to adult to elderly, we go through these stages, okay? And actually I want to read something from this book, The Personality Puzzle, that it talks about kind of Freud's idea on this, okay? At one point in his career, Freud thought that there might be a universal symbolic code of the unconscious mind in which certain symbols meant the same thing to everybody in the world. He thought that people could use these symbols to interpret the meanings of their dreams, and some of these are included in a little paperback books on dreams, etc., etc. So Freud believed that there were certain symbols that we found in life. And by the way, at this point, he's talking about thinking and consciousness, but just a little bit earlier in the chapter, he also talks about this. Freud had this idea of the stages that people go through. And of course, he names them a little different. Like when you're a baby, you're in the oral stage, so like you suck your thumb and stuff. Then you progress to what's called the anal stage, where basically like you're learning how to, you're getting potty trained essentially. And then you go like further and further along these stages into maturation. The point of the archetypes that we discuss in the monomyth, and the reason why they're so universal, just like the symbols that he talked about with dreams, and there is a difference, that's a whole nother discussion, I've actually done a video on it, the difference between dream symbolism and monomythic symbolism. But the major key here is everyone that grows up to be an adult, for the most part, and I mean like really the most part, we all go through the same stages of maturation. There's a little bit of a difference between genders, but not much. And even that difference doesn't change the archetypes, the archetypal figures that we encounter within our life. So for example, when you're a child, you are immediately met with the divine mother and the parental father figure. Okay, both of those are archetypal figures that we find in the monomyth. Okay, the divine figure and the parental figure. So no matter who you are, without exception, you meet those figures. That's why you can easily identify with them. It's not so much that they're encoded into our DNA, although maybe they are, but it's really that humans have no choice but to meet these figures throughout their life as they progress. The same thing with the quote unquote supernatural aid. This is an individual who's usually older, the old wise man or the old crone, the old wise woman, who comes along and gives you information about the special world, something you are unfamiliar with, and teaches you or gives you tools that's going to help you on your journey. So just imagine, as a kid growing up, your kindergarten teacher could have fit this role, okay? And even if they were, you know, at the very young kindergarten teacher, a 20-year-old kindergarten teacher, to you as a, you know, 4 or 5-year-old, they're an old crone or an old wise man, and they're bestowing knowledge and tools to you that will help you on your journey through that grade level, but also into the future. You know, like your career and your life. So those are just a few things. And then you have the shapeshifter, you know, someone who appears to you as maybe a friend but ends up being a foe, or vice versa. How many of us have met somebody that we didn't get along with at first, but then after a while they kind of grew on us and we became really close friends? Or the opposite could be true as well. Someone who we got along with really well in the beginning, but then over time it turned out that they weren't quite what they seemed, or your personalities didn't mesh. These are all archetypes that no matter who you are throughout your life, you encounter them very early on in the stages of development. And because of that, we readily identify with them because they're foundationally, they're fundamentally based in our psychology. So that's why we recognize these figures so easily. So now let me go back to the screen share here. That's enough of my face. And let's discuss this question a little bit more, okay? Now that we've kind of got an idea of what archetypes are, let's see. So again, here are the zodiac signs, and again, these are more personality based, but it just shows you like there are different kinds of archetypes, but again, the fundamental ones would be the ones that are identified in the monomyth. And as I said before, this is a whole nother topic, but there are basically two types. There are, let's see if I can, there are role archetypes. So if you see here, this is a spreadsheet I've been working on for my own personal well-being, for my own personal writing. And a role archetype is similar to what we just discussed: hero, shadow, mentor, herald. Informant is a new one that I've kind of created. There's a whole reasoning behind that. Don't worry about it. But here you see some other ones: trickster, shapeshifter. Let's see, the divine, the parent. So when we're talking about real life application, it's the same holds true. In our real lives, there are people who hold a role archetype in our life. Okay, your mother, most people who weren't born as orphans or whatever, your mother usually is the person who serves as the divine mother. Your father is usually the person who serves as the parental father figure. So that's why these why these archetypes are so powerful, because everybody has a mother and a father. Again, there are some outliers where people were raised by aunts and uncles or whatever, but for the most part, most people grow up with a mother and father figure, even if they aren't their biological mother or father many times. The same holds true with a mentor. The same holds true with like heralds. So a herald is another example of someone who comes into your life kind of unexpectedly, giving you a message that is going to take you out of your normal life and send you off into some unknown mission or world, right? That's what the herald does. And so if we go back, you can take a lot of these archetype quizzes and figure out like which one you are. But again, these are the same in my mind as a zodiac sign. They only carry as much weight as you give them. If you believe in that and it gives meaning to your life, then it will hold a lot of meaning in your life. If you don't, then it doesn't. That's kind of where now I want to pause here because this is very important. I truly honestly believe that the monomyth and the archetypes are very important to real life application, because in your real life, if you can identify where you are in the process of any given journey, it can kind of help you plan ahead for what stages you need next. Like what is the next thing you need to do? For example, if you decided, and I'm just thinking of a personal thing, if you decided that you wanted to you wanted to compete in some sort of competition, some athletic competition, maybe your friends told you about it, that was the herald, and you were like, I don't know if I should, and then you're like, well, no, this is something I really want to do. Maybe it's like a race, maybe it's a marathon, maybe it's for me it would be like a powerlifting meet. Whatever the case is, you finally decide, yeah, that's what I want to do. If you know what stage you are in the journey, then you could like say, okay, I'm just going to go on this journey alone and do it all by myself. But most heroes who go on the journey on their own in like fiction, right? They suffer a lot of unnecessary trials and defeats because they don't have someone there guiding them and kind of helping them, someone who's been there before. Whereas the ones that have a mentor, they're the ones, they have a little bit of assistance. So this is where, again, in a real life athletic competition, you might seek out a coach or a consultant if you're in a business. Whatever the case might be, like you seek someone out that has more knowledge than you in that special arena, that is going to give you the tools and knowledge you need to work in that new special world that you're unfamiliar with. Another idea just popped in my mind. Another example would be, maybe you want to learn coding. Well, you could just start trying to code and looking things up, or you could find someone or sign up for like a class at a college where they're going to teach you how to code. step by step, the basics. Or maybe you buy a book. That could also serve as a mentor. Whoever wrote the book is mentoring you through that process. The point is, there is real life application, and it's not just with the archetypes. We're focusing on archetypes because that's kind of how the question was generated, but in your life as well. When you go on these journeys, whether they end in success or failure, like let's say you go through the whole journey and you run the race or you run the marathon and you win. Okay, great, you won. But what does that mean? Like, what does it mean for your life? Like, what was the purpose? Was there some underlying theme that your life was trying to teach you, or that you were able to grasp from that part of the journey? Let's say you failed. There could be a whole different lesson there. And many times it's in our failures that we learn the greatest lessons. And again, if you don't believe me, look at a lot of the fictional examples that we have in film, in TV, in books, in video games. The character a lot of times will learn the most during their trials and during their failures. And even at the end, sometimes in that climactic moment, it requires a sacrifice that the hero was not willing to make earlier. And so in real life, that may actually be the case. For example, maybe you're at the end of the race and your leg is killing you. And you just know if you keep running, you're going to be injured. But in your mind, it's like it's all about finishing the race. So you have two options. Your decision is, I continue the race at risk of injury, that would be sacrifice, or I give up the race. And both might have their own lesson. Maybe if you give up the race, maybe it's not like you failed. Maybe it's more like winning isn't everything. Maybe that is the lesson. The point, and there's so many lessons that one can learn in life. Like, it depends on where you are in your own journey. And people are on multiple journeys throughout their life. Some people may have entered fatherhood, right? Fatherhood is, or motherhood. You go to the hospital and see the doctor and get a checkup or something, and the doctor's like, guess what? You're pregnant. Hello, that person has just acted as a herald and introduced you into a whole new mission that you have in life, a whole new journey that you have ahead of you. And yes, you're going to need mentors. You're going to have trials and tribulations along the way. You're going to learn lessons. And there was going to be sacrifice. Like, there's so many ways that the monomyth has real life applications. Hopefully I'm conveying that, articulating that to you. So the final thing that I'm going to bring up here is the Fool's Journey, also known as tarot or tarot. Many of you might be familiar with tarot cards. If you're not, just think of a regular deck of cards. You've got the king, the queen, the jack, the ace, the joker. These are all modern examples or modern renditions of something that's much older that goes back to what's called the Fool's Journey or tarot. And if you look it up, tarot actually means fool. And the Fool's Journey is not the same as the hero's journey, but it's very similar. And basically everybody starts out as a fool, and as they go on, like, they know nothing, and then as they go on, they mature and they grow and they develop and they evolve, right? And you continue. So if you guys want, you can just type in like what is tarot, and and you'll get a link like what I'm at here. Let's see. This was my list of options. The Fool's, like, there's all kinds of stuff. I just picked the first one. And I like it because it kind of shows you a progression, okay? Some people really believe in this just like they believe in the Zodiac Signs, okay? And this is what I was trying to say. Like, if something has meaning to you, then it will be meaningful in your life, and it can have power in your life. If it's not some of you may be like, I don't believe in tarot. I don't believe in Zodiac Signs. Well, guess what? If it has no meaning to you, then it has no meaning in your life. It's not a big deal. Don't even worry about it. But for those that do, it may hold great meaning, and they may make decisions based off of those meanings, which is why it would hold power in their life. Now, again, I'm talking about real life application right now. If we talk about the writing aspect, that's a whole different thing. If we're talking about using archetypes in the monomyth in your story, I believe that it's not the only approach you can take, but it is the strongest approach. If we look at stories throughout time, those that have stood the test of time, if we look at modern stories, those that are the most popular, that resonate with modern audiences, those that make the most money, they all have monomythic elements to them. And the ones that have the most are the ones that are the most successful and resonate with humans. And again, it's no trick. There's no magic to it. It really is that you're hitting people on this deep psychological level where they're seeing foundational elements of their life in front of them. So, with all this being said, now let's go back to Deanie's question, or Diney's question. You know, after taking one of these quizzes, can you identify who you are in someone else's life and how you should behave? I think the answer is a little bit. It's a little bit of both. I think the answer is yes and no. For example, the monomyth, I don't think it's going to dictate like one of these quizzes or you know, reading about the monomyth or anything. I don't think that's going to dictate who you are in someone else's life, whether you're the goddess to them or not. I mean, that's going to be up to that person. And again, that question is almost geared towards more of a tarot type of practitioner. And so the first thing I would say is, if you want a much more in-depth response, not in-depth, but like a much more, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I may not be the best person to answer that because I don't follow tarot. I don't use any of these archetypal quizzes to dictate like real life applications. That's not to say that they don't have any. I mean, I just spent the last 15 or 20 minutes discussing that there is a real life application to this stuff. All I'm saying is that take my answer with a grain of salt, because I do not practice tarot. I don't practice any kind of, you know, I don't follow mysticism or anything like that. I do believe the monomyth has real life applications, and so coming from that perspective, that's how I want to answer this question. Let's see. If you offer your friend ideas, that's great. And I don't know if you can be, you have a question here. How do I know that I'm the goddess that is created for him? I think this is the question that men and women ask each other, especially people who are in intimate relationships, ask each other all the time. And you can never know. The monomyth, I don't believe is going to solve that. Maybe someone who is a practitioner of tarot could give you a different answer based on what their knowledge is. My knowledge would say that I personally don't believe that anyone is made for anyone else, right? Like, you are a character in your own story, your real life story, and you have to decide who you are to other people and who they are to you. That's your decision. So ultimately, I would say you don't have to look any further than yourself, right? If you believe that you act as that individual for him, then sure. But the other thing to keep in mind is that the goddess figure that's just a label that was put on an archetype. The goddess figure in its truest form is not male or female. It's just a divine entity who has the power of life and death. So for many of us, it was our mother. That was the first example that we had in our lives of this individual. But as we go on through life, we may meet men who serve this purpose. We may, for example, a doctor, right? A doctor could be the quote unquote goddess that you meet at some point, who has the power over your life and death. Maybe because you know, you suffered some injury, maybe you had a heart attack, and they're the only person who can save you. That person might then become the goddess figure. And the key here with this divine person who we've labeled as the goddess, that archetype, the key here is that they not only provide the individual with tools and information that's going to help them along their journey. So again, if we use the doctor as an example, the doctor might say, in real life, I'm talking about real life, the doctor might say like, okay, here are some pills that you now have to take to help keep your blood pressure down. And from now on, I want you to think about staying away from junk food, right? So they just gave you tools in the pills and information in terms of like what not to eat, that's going to help you in the future of your journey, which is now you have heart problems, right? And how to get better. And then the key thing here that is going to differentiate a goddess archetype from, let's say, a mentor, because a mentor also gives tools and tips and a mindset and tool, for the journey, is that the goddess figure is going to present what's called the impossible task. This is something where you as an individual, or in a fictional story, the hero has to face some of their inner demons in order to accomplish whatever this impossible task is. So if we think about a great example from fiction is Dorothy is told by the Wizard of Oz that she has to go and steal the broomstick from the Wicked Witch in order for him to fulfill and grant her wishes. Okay, that is the impossible task. The witch represents Dorothy's inner demons. In Lord of the Rings, Gandalf and the Fellowship must go down into the mines of Moria, and they must face the Balrog in order to pass through and get further along in the journey. Okay, and the person who basically, well, I guess hold on. So that's number one. Number two would be, I'm talking about the goddess here, my fault. So that's Gandalf's personal journey, but in Lord of the Rings, it actually happens in the second one where they meet Galadriel, she gives him more tools and stuff, and then she basically tells Frodo, hey, you're going to have to do this on your own. Like, this mission is basically for you, and you're the only one that can do it. And Frodo tries to pawn off the ring to Galadriel, and she passes the test. She's like, oh, it's not me. But then she tells him, like, this mission was meant for you. And as we see, as Frodo goes further in the journey, not only does he face other problems, like he immediately basically meets Gollum. So Gollum is like his shadow figure. So he has to deal with Gollum. Gollum is sort of like his own personal demon. And by the end, like he faces, like he becomes darker because of the ring, and he has to overcome that. So the goddess figure will give some sort of impossible task. For Frodo, it's like you and you alone have to make it to Moria. You have to go into the Mount Doom and destroy the ring. Don't depend on anybody else here. It's on you. Don't ask me for help. Don't ask anybody else. It's you. And I know I'm going through a lot of things here, but I'm trying to give people fictional examples. In Star Wars, it's Luke rescues Princess Leia. But in order to save her completely and get the Death Star plans to the rebels, they have to basically go down the trash compactor. And when they're in that trash compactor area, he quote unquote faces a monster that pulls him under the water. And there's deep symbolic meaning there. I'm probably going way too much in depth, but the point is, if you are the goddess figure in someone's life, you're not just providing them tools and information that's going to help them along their journey, whatever journey it is that they're on, but you're also going to give them an impossible task, something that's going to force them to face their demons. And again, I don't know how realistic it is. Like, I don't go along and say to myself, like, imagining my kids on their own journey, and I don't say like, okay, as the mentor, this is what I need to do, or you know, I don't look at it that way. I do in fiction, and I'm not saying it's wrong to look at it that way. I'm just saying, like, I don't know how realistic that is. But it, on the flip side, where I do find that there is real life application is when you look at the roles that other people are playing in your life. I think that's really where you can identify who is serving certain roles and what role you're serving in another person's life. Maybe that would help you, what's the word? Like, maybe that would help you identify what role you should serve. So for example, if you continually find someone in your life who seems to be your friend, they act very friendly, but they're constantly stabbing you in the back, or they're constantly lying to you, that person is what would be called like the fake ally, and which is essentially, it's a subcategory of the shapeshifter archetype. And the shapeshifter archetype, in this sense, it's like a negative one. So they you know, once you've identified a person as a fake ally, then, like, in my opinion, if you identify that person in real life as a fake ally, someone who shapeshifts on you all the time, I would remove that person from my life, or I would have as little contact with them as possible. Sometimes we can't, right? Like in real life, you have a parent or a sibling who you can't remove them completely out of your life, but they're not serving a positive purpose in your life. So hopefully that helps. I'm really trying to address this question from as many perspectives as I can. And then, you know, you talk about you get the father archetype. I wouldn't worry about, honestly, I wouldn't worry about what archetype you get in these quizzes unless they really mean something to you. You need to evaluate your own life. You know, that's what I would do. And I would say, I do, to be honest with you, I do on several occasions when I know I'm like entering into some new thing, I will seek and search out a mentor. And I will look for them for advice, for wisdom, and things like that. If I was in a situation, like I said before, like with a doctor like that, and I'm sure I have been, that's the example that's coming to my mind, then sure, that person would be serving the goddess role for me, the divine figure role. When it comes to, like, let's talk about one more stage/role archetype to hopefully bring this home. When it comes to atonement with the father, so the father figure, this is a stage and a role archetype, that father figure. Again, it doesn't have to be a male or a female. The reason why it's called the father figure is because, again, when we consider the way children develop, especially in primitive cultures around the world, many of them live the first years with their mother, and then eventually they move out with their father. This is very true, especially in like tribal cultures where a boy has to become a hunter or something, right? They will leave the tent of the mother and then go live with the hunters. And from that point on, the male figures or the father figures are there. And in many mythological stories, the goal of a hero is to go and find their father, which essentially, Joseph Campbell has talked about this before. It essentially translates to, go find your mission in life, because especially back in the day, whatever your father did, that's usually what you did. If your father was a smith, you became a smith. If your father was a hunter, you became a hunter. If your father was a knight, you became a knight. If your father was a duke, you became a duke. So that mission of go find your father was sort of like, go find your mission in life. And normally when a child goes from adolescence to adulthood, that's what they're doing. They're like spending more time with those figures. A great example in the modern world where it's not really gender-based is if you think about the military. Many people around the world, but if we look at America in particular, many Americans volunteer to go into the military, and when they do so, and of course there's the whole herald process involved. Maybe somebody came to the school and talked up like all the benefits of the military. Maybe a parent was in the military or a grandparent, but for whatever reason, the person decides to join. Who, as they go through that process, they're going to meet someone there who's essentially like the father figure. They'll have a goddess figure in that as well. They'll have mentors, but this father figure is someone where they represent this ultimate power. Okay, and it could be like almost demonic. It could be like it could be benevolent or malevolent, right? I'm not saying in the military it's either. Some people might think it's both, but you will meet someone and you have to atone with that person. Atone means to become at one with them. So to become at one with the Father is to become like the Father. And this is a very interesting thing that Joseph Campbell talked about, is that father figure essentially represents like someone, when you become at one with the father figure or with the parental figure, it means you're becoming at one with life and with essentially all the unfairness, all the unjustness, all the grossness of life. And if we just stop for a second and we think about the world that we live in, it's a very scary place, and there's a lot of ugliness, right? Just if you can't imagine it in the human sense, just imagine the animal kingdom, right? Every week or so, a lion has to go out and hunt. And usually when they hunt, they got to kill, well, no, all the time when they hunt, they got to kill something. And usually when they kill something, they go after the weakest animal, which is normally like a little baby calf or something like that, right? There's nothing fair about that, but it's the way the world works, right? And so becoming at one with the parental figure or the father figure is realizing your station in life. As a person who lives in the world, you too have the capability of life and death. You too have the capability of fairness and unfairness. And you have to essentially grasp that, life isn't fair, and you're a part of this system. For better, sometimes you will be the person. Everybody has lied in their life. Everybody has hurt someone, whether intentionally or not intentionally. It boils down to the same thing about the lion and the zebra, right? Like, there are things that are fair and things that aren't fair, and that's just the way the world is. So this is a really long-winded approach here. Let's see, one other thing. Looks like he trusts me, and he also tries to protect my emotion. Look, it sounds like you guys have a pretty good relationship. you know, just from the little bit that you told me. But I think there's a couple things here. Going to, again, more detailed response for you, Dina, is, or Deanie, don't put too much stock in these quizzes. Like I do occasionally read Zodiacs, and I do think they're very accurate, but I don't base my life on them, right? At some point, you as the person have to make the decision. If you think this person is important to you, then treat them the way that you would treat an important person. You know, if you see him as a hero or whatever, like I don't know what quiz you took, and I really don't think it matters. What really matters is if you have feelings for him, then treat him well. And but don't look to other. I wouldn't look to other people or the monomyth or a quiz to decide my love life. You know, if it was me, I would make that decision. I would evaluate the situation. You can put labels on people all you want and how they fit in your life, but at the end of the day, it sounds to me like you already know the answer. You paint this person in a really good light, so it seems like they're the person, you know? And here's the thing, the world always changes. Things are in constant motion. The universe is in constant motion. The galaxy is in constant motion. The planets are in constant motion. We will never be in the same place we ever were in any point in time ever again, which means that things are always changing. Even down to the, like, beyond, like, the atomic level, things are never in the same spot, which means that, you know, things between you guys may be great from now till eternity, or they might change tomorrow, or you might meet someone new, or he might meet someone new. That doesn't, like, none of that matters. Like, if this is what is important to you now, then treat it as it's important. And every day, like, the point is, you don't have to make a decision now that's gonna, like, you know, be permanent for the rest of your life. If things change, then change with them. Just like, you know, if you're out in the ocean and you're swimming and a wave comes, you kind of try to avoid the wave so that you don't drown, you know? Like, that would, to me, that's pretty much the bottom line. The monomyth is a great tool and approach to both fiction and real life application, but it's not to be taken too seriously, and it's not to be taken to extremes. One thing that I love that Joseph Campbell said, and I'll end on this, is he basically said, you know, we as humans create rules and systems to serve us, right? A computer is built to serve us. A car is built to serve us. But the minute that we start serving the system is the minute that we lose our humanity. The monomyth is no different than a computer or a car, okay? It is a tool that helps a human reach their fullest potential, whether it's in writing or real life application. But if we subject ourselves to the monomyth and start to think that it is the all-knowing rule system on love life and life in general, then we start to miss out and we start to lose our humanity. So I hope that helps, and I hope that gives you some insight. Again, as I said in the beginning, like, you may want to, if you want more like relationship advice that's based on maybe tarot or something, or a psychic, I would seek someone out who's more of a practitioner of that. For the record, while I do believe that there are real life monomythic applications that I've discussed in this video, I personally only use it for a writing approach to fiction. So, and of course, you know, we can see it used throughout all kinds of different media. But hope this helps. Really appreciate the question. I think it opened up a very interesting conversation that needed to be addressed, and it also opens up some ideas about archetypes, which is going to be one of my main focuses. And as you can see, I'll kind of show you here. In the same video, Dread Electric asked me, hey, can we get more on the monomyth, archetypes, character development, which is what I plan on talking about in future videos. So, all right, that is gonna end it for me. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.